Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Arts and Ideas. I'm Sue Swinand, and my guest today is award-winning artist Ella Delyanis. And Ella, it's a pleasure to finally have you on the show.
Yes, I've been aware that you've been doing this for quite a while, Sue, and I'm flattered that you asked me.
I finally got her here. But Ella, some of you may know Ella from her work at the Worcester Art Museum, where she has taught adults art classes
since 1978.
1978. So you actually beat me by a few years there.
I'm sad to say I'm the longest running teacher there.
Oh my goodness, that's quite an honor.
I guess.
And I'm sure thousands of people in the area have worked with you over the years.
Probably so. People will come up to me in the supermarket. Oh, I was in your class 6 years ago, and I smile politely because I probably don't remember them.
I smile and say, I remember that painting you did of the hands.
Yes. I find I remember the artwork more than I remember the person.
Exactly.
Isn't that strange?
But I
true.
think I remember your work also back in the day, in the early 80s, I suppose, from the very early Arts Worcester biennials.
Probably so.
And you had, the reason I remember seeing your work is because I was attracted to it, but also you had won the Mass Fellowship, I think, or the, what was it? The
Artist Foundation
yes.
out of Boston. I never actually got the money, but if I recall, I was a finalist twice, and I think a semifinalist one time. So I came close, but no cigar, as they say.
That's kind of an honor right there, though. It shows the caliber of your work and how it's respected in the area.
It was flattering at the time.
Yeah. So I met you through the Worcester Art Museum, but so you've taught there for all these years, and
I have.
What has that been like in terms of your career, and what are the classes like there? Maybe people would be interested.
I teach fairly traditional things such as drawing and painting and landscape painting. Because I work in pastel, I teach pastel drawing and painting. I've done other things like taught portrait classes. Probably the only thing I haven't taught is watercolor, because I don't feel like I know all the technical ins and outs of watercolor.
And I was teaching all those classes.
Yes, and we had to have a spot for Sue. And I guess what I would say about teaching is it helps you as an artist because it reinforces things that are important to you.
Uh-huh.
And it's very satisfying to help people. I feel like I learned how to teach art from the best teachers I had at Boston University.
So you got your training at BU, and
yes.
What did you do there?
Well, BU's, I'm assuming it is still known as a very traditional art school. It certainly was at the time. I graduated in 1972. It has always been known for a very traditional academic training. By that I mean lots and lots of drawing, drawing from the figure every day of the week, painting from the figure pretty much every day of the week, design courses, all
so good, solid, basic foundation.
All the basic foundational training. And I remember as a sophomore nearing the middle or end of the year being at a crossroads. Do I major in painting or do I major in art education? It's probably the classic conundrum that artists have.
Because you think, maybe I'd like to have a job and have an income.
I'm how old am I? I'm 18, I'm 19 years old. It's like, maybe I need to be practical and figure out how to make money. But I just could not make myself major in art education because I realized what I really wanted to do was be an artist. Well, for the first year out of school, I would say I tried to replicate things that I had done in school, namely working from still life, looking out the window, doing seeing out the window, all from life. And I probably and I really did feel like I was floundering somewhat because no longer was anybody telling me what to do or providing models, which, beginning artists certainly can't afford to be hiring their own models. So I was definitely floundering, and I felt like I needed to find my own voice, something different than what I had done in school. And I began to work more abstractly. And having such an education so totally tied to looking at things, be it people or landscape or still life, even when I worked abstractly, I found it very helpful to work from things. And by that I mean I piled stuff in the corner of my studio, boxes and chairs and sticks and other pieces of wood, and made this assemblage kind of.
A composition from forms.
From stuff,
yeah,
a composition from forms. And I use that as a starting point, looking at it, finding abstracted shapes, piecing it together, and designing abstractions.
When did you come to this area? And
let's see. My husband is a lawyer, and he got out of law school, and he got in 1976, I think it was, and he got his first legal job in a small firm here in Worcester, and that's how we ended up in Worcester County. And that was the fall of '77.
Well, just like, how did that affect your career?
Yeah, well, so I need to backtrack a little bit. So I'd been doing these abstractions, and some of them started to look a little like landscapes. Like somewhere in the back, sort of unconsciously, I think, some of the imaginary spaces I was creating had a landscape feel to them, which was interesting. So I sort of responded to that. I went outside and did some drawing from life in Somerville, railroad tracks, city streets, that kind of thing. But I also had an artist friend who had a car. Well, I didn't have a car. And she wanted to go up to Plum Island, Newburyport, that area, to paint. I said, okay, I'll go with you. So I went up there, and I didn't actually paint. That was the beginning of my exploration with pastel. I found pastel not so scary and trying something new than oil paint or acrylic, and that was really the beginning of my using pastels. And, actually, some of the abstractions had been done with pastel as well as acrylic and some mixed media work with collage. So anyway, we went up to Plum Island, and it was such a magnificent experience. Somehow those sand dunes were just abstract enough that it sort of worked with the abstraction that I had been doing. So I began doing these landscapes that were, by the standards of what I do now, fairly abstract. Simple shapes, relatively thin application of pastel. But they were definitely the impetus as time went on, to move into being a more traditional landscape painter.
So that kind of brings us to your time in Worcester County.
Right.
And what was it about the landscapes in Worcester County that has engaged you for all these years?
Well, it's a wonderful place to be a landscape painter, first of all.
Maybe we could start with one of the first images.
Yeah, these images are in no particular order. They certainly aren't chronological. This one that you're seeing right now is actually up in Bar Harbor, Maine, which is not Central Mass, obviously, but it has all the elements
it could
be elements that I find very interesting, namely space, light, interesting forms, variety of forms. It's typical of what for many years has interested me.
I think the pastel media has one feature that is conducive to a landscape too, which is that ability to create a soft edge. Like with watercolor, to get all those, you can't get those soft, you can with wet into wet, but it's a little bit challenging to get the forms like a tree against another tree. Or go ahead. So.
Well, one of the things that I teach my students, and I follow my own advice, somewhere along the line I learned that in creating a landscape, it's very important to work from back to front, because you're overlapping the forms, you're creating perspective in the process of doing that. And
see, the watercolor is the opposite. Watercolor is the opposite. You put the lights and then you build to the back. You lay on the darks.
You go from light to mid-tone to darks, and that may have nothing to do with space.
Yeah.
And I fool around with watercolor once in a while. I actually did it yesterday. But an opaque medium, be it pastel, acrylic or oil, allows you to work from back to
Oh,
front.
sure. You can lay on the light
Right.
tips of the branches at the end.
At the
In
bitter end,
watercolor, you have to either lift them out or you
save them.
Oh, I love this one. Is with the beaver lodge.
Well,
Is that a beaver lodge?
I don't know. It's
Looks
actually some conservation land in Grafton in the fall, and I don't know what this sort of
Pile up is.
yeah, I don't know what it is, but it was a beautiful this mauve color.
I really like the sticks in that. See, that would be really with watercolor. You'd have to do that backwards.
Exactly.
You know?
Right. Yeah. So in the case
I like
of
that
pastel,
composition too.
oh, thank you. It's not a new piece. There was 3 of them. I sold a couple of them, but this one is I still have.
The lavenders in the landscape are very, very lovely and unusual.
Yes, and sometimes you think it's spring. This could be almost spring with that kind of color,
Yeah.
but it is fall. So that's in Grafton. I live in Grafton. A lot of these are Grafton, not all of them. This one is also fall. This happens to be down in Uxbridge. I just came across this wonderful marsh with this fantastic stand of trees, and I was just fascinated with how beautiful
I
it
like
was.
the bush in the foreground.
Yes, and I love doing that bush in the foreground, that green gold and the reflections, and it's a pretty big piece. It's like
October's bright blue weather.
What did I call this? Magnificent October stand, because it was this magnificent stand of what I think were oak
And this
trees.
is pastel.
And this is also pastel.
Now, would you say you're primarily a pastel artist?
No, I consider myself a landscape artist who works
In whatever media?
primarily pastel and oil, and once in a while I'll do an acrylic.
Okay.
Which I think I have some in the collection. Now this
That's a nice one.
This is oil. This is Mill Pond in Westboro in May, and I've also painted this pond.
I like the simplicity of this one and
Thank
the
you.
close-knit color scheme.
Yeah, it's that yellow-green you get early in May, and
Yeah.
again, it's about the space. I love the way the growth in the water kind of pulls your eye back.
I like the big and little of the water
Right.
shapes too. You get
Right.
the enormous and then the little elliptical ponds that go back and
Right.
back and back,
Right, that
zigging. and-
feeling of going from big in the foreground to small.
And the nice thing is the viewer's right in the water.
Practically, you're right.
It feels like you're standing in the water, really.
I think everything you've seen so far has been done from my own photography. But
Oh, so you do it for photography?
For a lot of years I have, yes, but for a good 10 years I worked outside. So
You've been there.
Yes, I would like to say that my work is largely informed by all those years of working outside.
Sure, it's all stored in your
It's
memory book.
stored in your visual memory,
Yeah.
and a constant thing I'm saying to students when they're working from photographs, you have to forget that it's a photo and try to really
That's why I
understand
think
the
it's
space.
important to make it your own photograph.
Oh,
Because that
yes.
means you were there, you smelled it,
Right.
you felt the wind there, you heard the frogs,
Right.
you know, and
Right.
then when you paint it, you can call up all that
Right.
experience.
And I tell people, you really, if you want to do landscape, you really should do landscape that you're familiar with. If you've never been to Alaska, don't paint Alaska.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Even if you love Alaska.
Well,
Now this one is actually out my upstairs, back of the house, bathroom window. It's a view that we get in the wintertime. We get this.
it looks so cold and wintry.
Yes.
Just at that hour before sunset,
Right, it's
the
right
dusk.
around Christmas time, I believe, and we often in the winter get this great sunset back there. I mean, it's there all the time, but of course, when the greenery is on the trees, you don't see it.
But it's that blue hour, the
Yes.
Purkinje effect, or
Right.
whatever it's
The-
called.
the-
Yeah,
The snow is
where
picking up,
everything is blue.
and everything is being reflected by the
Yeah,
wonderful sky.
lovely.
And it's, I think you can tell that I'm up high looking down
Yes,
on that.
yes, you can. This
And
horizon is
happily
very
I did
high.
sell that piece. Look, sort of opposite extreme in terms of color. This is May again, and it's just a spot in somebody's yard near where I live in Grafton.
Is it lupin?
I don't know what it is. I
Huh.
entitled it Lonely May Cedar because to me it was
Right
like
in the middle, yeah.
the cedar, which is almost in the middle, did seem very lonely to me. compared to the other deciduous trees around
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And the purple flowers, I honestly don't, I'm not much of a gardener. I really don't know what it was. It's just I liked the color of it.
Yeah.
And I added to it. Actually, a lot of what's in the
It
fork.
could be Scilla or
Yeah, I don't know. It's not
Chinodoxa. It
some
looks
kind of
taller.
like a ground cover.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, then it might be that Scilla. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there wasn't much in the foreground. I pretty much made that up. It was mostly further back towards the tree.
Well, is this water?
Whoops.
Hold back.
No, I'm
Go
sorry.
back.
I'm sorry. No, it's not water.
Oh.
It's a yard.
Oh,
it's a yard.
Then it's definitely either Scilla
No,
or
it's no
Chinodoxa.
water.
I got it.
It's just
I thought that was a little pool back there.
No, it's
okay,
that
got it.
purpley blue flower, which
I like to believe it's blue.
And look, I'll tell you one thing. I had a hard time photographing that piece because it's sort of blue and sort of purple, and it's really hard to get that color right.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, this is, again, it's Grafton. I think like a lot of landscape artists, I photograph what I see around me and draw what I see around me because that's what's convenient, basically, and there's a lot of interesting things in our own neighborhoods. This is a little inlet going into Lake Ripple, which some of you may be familiar with. And I've done various pieces from Lake Ripple. This is still
Interesting
pastel.
how the scale from large to small
Yes.
gives you that big jump in space.
Exactly. Yeah, that was an interesting thing to do in this piece. And there's actually a road, which you can barely make out. But to me, that was the drama of it, was the change in scale. And I called it Sentinels because that's Tree Sentinel, because that's what it was like. Now this one's a little different because it's oil pastel, which
Let's talk about oil
Yeah.
pastel and the other pastel medias, because
Sure.
now mostly you're using soft pastel, is that correct?
Artist soft pastel is correct.
And I actually brought with me a box of
Oh, you
pastels
did?
today and a piece of paper, because I thought maybe some of you out in TV land might not really know what pastels look like. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about,
Sure.
what the pastel is. What is pastel?
Well, pastel is simply pure, I should backtrack a little bit. All art materials that have color, be it oil paint, acrylic, watercolor, or pastel, they all start with pigment. And what makes it what it is the so-called binder. Well,
so pigment being ground,
Color.
some kind of earth or stone
Or
chemical, or it's pure color.
pure color, exactly. Now, in the binder is basically the glue. That in the case of pastel, it holds the stick together. In the case of oil paint, it holds the oil paint together, and so on and so forth. Well, in the case of pastel, the binder is considered to be relatively weak because the process is very different than painting. You're pushing onto a piece of paper.
Let's put it on the box so we don't get it on your computer.
You're pushing onto the paper and making marks.
It's a dry, abrasive scrub against,
Right.
It's like a chalk rubbing on a rough surface.
Exactly. You need a somewhat rough surface for them to work, and artists use all kinds of different papers for pastel. But if the binder weren't weak, whoops. And that doesn't matter. Broken pieces are great in pastel. If the binder were not weak, rather, the pastel would not come off on the paper. And you make your color,
you just use that on the side,
right?
And you can get thick and thin just like you would with a brushstroke.
And typically you change color by working from dark to light. So if I put down a dark green like this, and I want a yellower green for maybe a tree, I work yellow on the top. That's basically the way they work. And
they can be blended with a stick or your finger, and really are very soft, and you can get terrific soft edges.
You can manipulate them. I don't do much with my fingers. The problem with finger blending is you can get kind of muddy effects if you're not careful. I generally just work from harder pastels to softer pastels.
Do you use any of those little rubber scrubs? No?
Nope.
How about lifting with erasers and chamois and things like that?
No, it's all an additive process.
So you're all putting on.
And as you're pushing one color into another, you're creating the mixes that you want.
Okay.
Now, occasionally, where a subtle blend is required in a sky.
Or a face or something.
Yeah, well, and I'm thinking landscape because that's what I do. Occasionally I might do a little bit of that, but it works best when you're working with related colors.
And the idea is that the pastel pigment is so powerful because there's nothing there but a stick of pigment.
Exactly.
So you get
Right.
these very, very bright colors.
Right.
The other thing that I was going to say, though, is that there's light in the color.
That's right.
You're
right.
not relying on the white of the ground like you are in watercolor.
Exactly, no.
Or even in acrylic painting. You're relying on the light coming through the color to some degree. Whereas with pastel, you're laying light onto the surface.
That's right.
Yeah.
Pastel is a lot more like the two opaque mediums of oil and acrylic than it is
Yeah.
like watercolor.
Yeah, yeah.
I've often had students who come to my pastel classes having done watercolor, and
It's backwards for
it's
them.
backwards for them.
Yeah.
They have to learn it all over again because they have to work from dark to to light,
Yeah.
not light to dark.
It can be instinctive, though, as you see that you can go back and put a light on a dark.
Oh,
you
yes.
know.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a
Yeah.
convenience of one media that the watercolor is the opposite. But the other thing, of course, is crépa, which...
Well, that's what this piece is. This is
Oh, really?
Yeah, this is oil pastel, which is Crépas is a brand name.
But it just means that there's oil in the
Exactly.
pigment stick.
Exactly.
So it doesn't rub off or blow off as
no,
easily.
it's like a greasy crayon almost.
But it never dries.
It never dries.
It's always gummy.
Well, it dries
always,
somewhat, but unlike
you could always rub it.
you can
it's
scrape into it,
yeah,
you
yeah.
can rub into it.
It's like more waxy, but it's oil.
I invest maybe last Christmas time, I invested in some good quality oil pastels, Sennelier being one of them. And I like oil pastels, but they're very different. They're probably more like oil paint.
So how do you have to paint to frame something like that? When you have a pastel or an oil pastel, one of the things I remember not liking about the media was that it was hard to frame those.
They have to be framed under glass, no different than.
But they also they drop little pieces onto the mat bevel.
Well, that's an issue.
Do you ever float the mat out?
Yes,
So, yeah.
yes. You have to have what pastel artists, oil pastel artists, and regular soft pastel artists use typically is a trap mat, where the mat is raised up away from the work.
So what that means is that the mat is a little bit, there's a spacer behind the mat so that if the dirt falls off the pastel, it goes behind the mat instead of falling into the bevel of the mat.
A lot of artists who work in either oil or traditional pastel mediums these days are not using mats at all. I'm typically not framing with mats.
So you're just floating it on a
I'm using a separator in the frame.
Yeah, a spacer.
A spacer, exactly, and it makes them look more like paintings. Well, oil paintings.
Well, you know, a lot of people consider pastel painting. When you fill the whole sheet with pigment and strokes, they consider it pastel painting. Whereas I think when you just do an outline kind of thing, it's considered a drawing medium.
That's the way I look at it.
We better look at more images
okay,
or
so
we'll
anyway,
never
this
see
is
them.
oil pastel, which is a little different. This is traditional soft pastel, not a particularly large piece. It's only 8 by 10. I've over the years done lots of images with purple loosestrife, which I know is not a good plant in terms of the environment, but it's a wonderful color to paint.
It's very invasive, but we love it.
We love the color of it.
I had some in my garden once, I have to admit.
Yeah, and it seems to grow everywhere. Now this piece is oil, a large oil, fairly large oil, 30 by 40, I believe. It's my attempt to still use the landscape but work a little more abstracely.
Looking just for those ripply shapes.
Exactly.
And things.
It's all about shape and
is
color.
this oil or
this
acrylic?
This is oil. This is oil. This is a very recently finished painting.
It's a nice one.
Thank you. This is, I think it's the Blackstone River in Uxbridge, and I painted it a couple other times, but not as big as this. And the challenge for me was dealing with this wonderful depth of space. And the change in scale. Took me, I worked on this for maybe 2.5 months.
Wow.
Took a long time to solve.
You said oil.
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 Yeah. Took a long time to solve what I considered all the problems, from all the various forms and the light and getting the space right, and kind of worked from the top down. I did the sky in a couple of days, and then I kept working.
Let's show
downhill.
a few more, because I'm afraid we're running out of time.
We're talking too much, Sue, I guess.
My problem always.
Another sort of abstracted piece. This is very small. It's only like 4 inches square. It's traditional pastel and gouache. This is pastel with an oil underpainting.
Yeah. Where are you showing these works?
I have work at basically 4 different galleries. I have work at Eventide Gallery in Essex. It's actually in a restaurant space, but it's a beautiful space overlooking the water. I have work in Kennebunkport at, I just forgot his name. I'll come back to it.
Go ahead.
Scott Bundy. It's the Scott Bundy Gallery. And I just fairly recently got into a gallery in Concord, New Hampshire, the Millbrook Gallery. And I'm in a co-op gallery in Putnam, Connecticut, the Silver Circle Gallery.
So you're busy.
My work.
Now you're also in the show right now, aren't you, on the Cape?
Yes, I'm in the Cape. That's only like 3.5 week show. I'm in the Pastel Painters Society of Cape Cod's annual for pastels only show. I've been in that show for the 3rd time. This is the 3rd year I've been in that show.
I love this one with the drama of the
sky.
this
is oil. This is up in Kennebunkport. It's the Sudbury River.
Well, I think as we probably should say your work can also be seen on the internet.
Yes.
And I think we're
we've
going to have to
done more
draw
than
it. We're going to have to draw it to a close there. But I'm sure there's so much more to see. But look for Ella's work on the internet.
EllaDelyanis.com is all you need to do, and you'll find me.
Well, thanks a lot for showing us your work. Yeah. I really enjoyed seeing it.
I enjoyed doing this.
And hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you'll join us again next time for another edition of Arts and Ideas.